Hello everyone and welcome back to round 3 of the Superbet Chess Classic 2025. It is Praggnanandhaa versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov. Both of them had a, I would say a great start to the tournament. Both of them drew world champion Gukesh. Also, Pragg drew against Fabiano and Nodirbek drew against Levon. So, probably both of them would be happier with win and the win, but I mean, you have to be a little bit realistic. And now they have to play each other, and I mean, both of these guys deserve to win. So let's just check out the game and see what happens. It's a very nice game. Has a little bit of everything. Bishops of opposite color. Maybe pushing over pushing. Some AlphaZero style playing. So yeah, I think you guys will enjoy it. Let's check it out, and we will also check out one more game from this round, and then we're going to discuss the standings. I rarely go into standings before round 3 has finished, so this is now round 3. Maybe we check out another game, and then we'll see, how everything is going. So Pragg with white opens with pawn to c4. We have pawn to g6. Sorry about that, and pawn to d4. We have knight to f6, knight to c3, and pawn to d5, a fancy way of reaching the Gruenfeld defense. And usually you will see a c captures on d5, knight captures, and now either bishop to d2 or the immediate pawn to e4. So that is the main way of treating the Gruenfeld. But here we have knight to f3. This is the 3 knights variation against the Gruenfeld. Bishop to g7 by Nodirbek and bishop to g5. This is the Tigran Petrosyan system, and it is best countered by immediately challenging the bishop. Knight to e4, this is what Nodirbek plays. Bishop to f4, castles kingside, and pawn to e3. Nothing new being played here, all been played before. You can see by the situation on the clocks, they're playing instantly. Pawn to c5. Here Nodirbek invested some 15 minutes into this idea, but Pragg replies instantly. C captures on d5, knight captures on c3, b captures, queen captures on d5, and now bishop to e2. We have another trade on d4, c captures, and knight to c6. And Pragg just castles kingside. If you can see the situation on the clock, Pragg is even gaining time. They both started with an hour and 30 minutes on the clock, so Pragg is playing much faster, than Nodirbek, saying that he is still well within his preparation. We have bishop to f5, and now there are, okay, this is, I left this here because maybe I'm going to use this for a thumbnail, maybe not, maybe, I don't know what kind of a thumbnail it will be, but queen to a4 is the move that people usually play here, and it's been played over 100 times, even in top-level GM games like Magnus Carlsen played it against Alexander Grishuk, Gelfand played it against Kasparov played it against other people. I think like Kramnik played it against Gelfand. Everyone played it against everyone because it's the best move, even today recommended by the engine. But Pragg goes for pawn to h4. It is with knight to h4 like second or third most recommended move by the engine, depending on which engine you're using and at what depth. Because I could tell you what the engine is saying. I usually have the positions analyzed up to depth 40. Maybe if it's a really complicated position, I will allow it to go up to 50, as that requires time. But these players, when they're preparing for a serious tournament, I imagine they are using outside resources because, you're not going to bring a very, very strong laptop to a tournament because that would just be silly, and there are no laptops that are that strong. So you just, hire a company that allows you to use their resources, and then you can, calculate a line, let's say to a depth of 100. I had, at one time such a company contacted me if I wanted to advertise them on the channel. I declined because they were extremely expensive, but I did analyze some Evans Gambit lines, to the depth of 100. So, just saying. So, okay, pawn to h4. Again, has been played, but 3 games that I've found in the database. Rook 8 to c8, we have pawn to h5. Now, either black captures or Pragg will just advance the pawn to h6. And interestingly, there is one game, it was played on April 1st, where g captures on h5 was played. It was played between Dariusz Mikrut and Uriel Suarez, and it is, in fact, the top move recommended by the engine. Black won this game very nicely, but in the game, Nodirbek chooses a different route. He goes rook f to d8, and it is now, as of move 14, that we have a completely new game. And Pragg does not think twice. He advances the pawn to h6 right away. And I think this is, what Pragg's preparation was not mainly about, but was definitely in there somewhere, that if this pawn is allowed to get to h6, then it's going to be very, very difficult for black. And g captures on h5, if you don't have this, well, in your arsenal going into the game, it's not an easy move to make over the board, but definitely a move that, you know, a player like Nodirbek would do. We've seen him do such moves many, many times. So, okay, you can go bishop f8, bishop to h8, bishop to f6. Bishop to f6 is what Nodirbek chooses. Other moves are also perfectly fine. You could go bishop to f8, bishop to h8, maybe not as great. But okay, bishop to f6. We have queen to a4 now by Pragg, and queen to a5, going for a queen trade. And while Pragg could decline, maybe with some pressure on b7, he goes for the trade. We have queen captures, knight captures, rook 8 to c1, and knight back to c6. So what did Pragg get, you know, from his preparation? Well, he got the pawn all the way to h6, which is very annoying to black, and he's up on time. So it's not terrible against a player like Nodirbek, definitely. Pawn to a3, we have pawn to e6, and knight to g5. Okay, pawn to e5. Nodirbek finds a nice opportunity to strike in the center. D captures on e5, knight captures, and now rook captures on c8. We have rook captures, rook to d1, and just bishop back to e7. We have pawn to e4, and now the problem is where do you go with the bishop? If you go, let's say, bishop g4, f3, it seems like not a lot for black to do here. You can actually go for rook to c2, and then it's well, definitely playable, like f captures on g4, rook captures on e2, king f1, rook c2, and now you can capture on e5 and give up the g5 knight, and it seems like you're going to lose the pawn, but you can play the tricky bishop f4. And the back rank issues for black are, you know, ever present, and they will be a problem for Nodirbek for the entire game. So after e4, he played bishop captures on g5, bishop captures, now bishop captures on e4, and we have bishop to f6, attacking the knight. For the moment, Pragg is down a pawn, but not in a bad position. You know, definitely with the pawn on h6, the bishop controlling this diagonal, and if the knight moves, the rook coming to d7 will not be pleasant. So here we have knight to c6 and the immediate rook to d7. Okay, we have knight to b8, chasing the rook away. We have rook to e7 with tempo on the bishop, bishop to d5, and bishop to g7. This looks like a pretty weird square for the bishop, as it's not doing all that much, but it is keeping that black king at bay. Even if you push the f-pawn, the rook is stopping any advancement of the king. So this is a big advantage for Praggnanandhaa, even though the engine will say it is a little advantage. You know, as a human, you have to play moves and you have to burn time. So it's not easy, even though Nodirbek currently has twice Pragg's time and still 11 moves to time control. We have rook to d8, bishop to b5, pawn to a6, bishop a4, b5, bishop to d1, and now knight to c6. There are no good discoveries with the bishop. It seems like maybe you could snatch a pawn and then, you know, capture the bishop on d1, but if you do this, well, let's not forget about the back rank issues. So that rook is not leaving the back rank anytime soon. We have knight to c6, attacking the rook, rook c7, and the bishop to e6. Now, hoping that maybe, you know, you can trade as it comes with check, but rook captures on c6. There was no other way to do it. Nodirbek decides to give up a pawn just you know, to free up his pieces. Rook captures on d1 with check, king h2, and he goes rook back to d8, and now rook captures on a6. So it's hard to say, you know, what exactly did you free giving up that pawn, because you still will not be able to move that rook away from the back rank. Bishop to c4, and now rook to a7. And this is the point. Nodirbek is no longer trying to push or win. He's just trying to hold on. He put the light square bishop guarding the b5 pawn. This pawn is on a dark square, so, you know, it's not doing anything. The bishop is on a dark square. It cannot touch c4 or b5. So Nodirbek is saying, okay, I mean, bishops of opposite color, the material is equal, let's call it a day. But, you know, it doesn't hurt to try, and Pragg still has a king to activate. Nodirbek does not. We have bishop to d5, pawn to f3, rook to a8, hoping to get a rook trade in, as the pawn on a3 is hanging as well, but rook to d7. And it doesn't even matter that the bishop is attacked, you still won't be able to capture due to the back rank issues. Bishop to c4, we have rook to b7, and rook back to e8. We have king to g3, Pragg finally starts advancing with the king. We have rook to a8, king to f2, and now rook to e8. We have bishop to e5. I think trying to create sort of a pathway for the white king, because again, if captures checkmate, I don't think I have to, you know, say it anymore. Rook to c8, and now not king to e3. King to e3, although it looks very nice, you also allowed the black king to activate. And now after king d4, rook d8 check, the white king has to go back. If you go forward, you're just gonna blunder a bishop on e5. So after rook c8, bishop back to g7, stopping any king to f8 action. We have rook to a8 and pawn to g4. We have rook to e8. Again, Nodirbek can just move the rook back and forth, not much to be done here. King g3, bishop to e2, and pawn to f4. We have rook to a8 and king to h4. Rook to c8, and now king to g5, preparing pawn to f5. So again, it's not probably it's not a losing position for black, but it is very hard to make moves. You always have to make sure whether it's okay to move the rook back and forth. Bishop to d3, we have bishop to e5, and now rook to e8. So f5 will be met, of course, with just captures. Of course, I'm just kidding, as the back rank issues are there. So here we have bishop to d6 and bishop to c4. We have pawn to f5. Finally, the pawn marches forward. Rook to c8 and bishop to e5. We have rook back to e8, attacking the bishop, and rook to d7. Of course, yeah, we're not going to say it. We have rook back to c8 and bishop to f6. We have g captures on f5, g captures, and finally king to f8. Nodirbek manages to get his king into the game. Rook to b7, and now rook to a8. We have bishop to e7 with check. Not so much for the reason of defending the a3 pawn, because you could also give a check once the rook captures and just pick up the rook on a3. But freeing up the f6 square for the king, amongst other things. So king to e8, and now bishop to b4. And now you're threatening rook to e7, king to f6, king to g7, and there is nothing Nodirbek can do here. But he will try rook to a6, and now there is only one way for Pragg to win the game, and I'm sure you guys see it, as you guys are amazing players. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Praggnanandhaa while I give you a couple of seconds. The only move that wins the game for Pragg is to win the h7 pawn while you still can, and he does it. We have rook to b8 with check, king to d7, only move black has at his disposal, and rook to h8, and he was in this position on move 61 that Nodirbek Abdusattorov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So a very, very unique and weird victory. You can see that Nodirbek didn't do, you know, anything wrong particularly, or specifically, but just the combination of everything. Pragg playing really, really quickly. He got him out of book fairly early on in a very, very well-known line. He managed to get that h4, h5 in, and then Nodirbek did not capture as he should have. He allowed the pawn to end up all the way to h6, and that is it. Very nice victory for him. So after 2 draws each, Pragg now takes the win, and Nodirbek gets his first loss. And yeah, we're going to cover one more game, and then we're going to go over the standings. So I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank E1 Check, Only Bullet, Random Pawn, Douglas Van Bandhuizen, and Samuel Kamuli for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.